Hello again, my precious friends. Thanks for joining me once again. Aunt Patty's the Carnivore Hippie. And what am I going to talk to you about today? Today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story because I promised that I would do that for you. Excuse me. Why is it that when I turn this dang camera on, my face starts to itch? That's so annoying. Anyway, I've already restarted the video twice because my face was itching, and I'm just not going to do it again. So I hope you'll bear with me. But my story, I was in a profoundly dark place. I'd had suffered from clinical depression for many years by that time, but in 2017, in the winter of 2017, I had lived through basically witnessing my only child pass away from a drug overdose in 2010. And then in 2016, I witnessed my mother pass away, basically in my arms, from a burst coronary aneurysm. And I had significant PTSD, complicated by a clinical depression. And I had been seeking treatment for the PTSD, but I quickly learned that treatment for PTSD consists primarily of the problematic behaviors of anxiety, panic attacks, and violent outbursts. And if you don't have significant levels of any of those behaviors, the treatment that you can get is pretty slim pickings, really. And so I rapidly gave up on that because none of those three symptoms were a big problem for me. What was a problem for me was the ideation. PTSD can put you in a situation where you feel like the world has become completely unpredictable. You can't trust anything that you used to put your trust in anymore. It feels like the world is dangerous and there's something that could possibly get you around every corner. And it also makes you feel hopeless. Like that's the way the world is. The world has become dangerous and unpredictable, and there's absolutely nothing you can do to additionally protect yourself. Because no matter what you build up, the world can just snatch it all away from you in a second. And this type of ideation is profoundly immobilizing, and that's the point where I found myself. I just didn't feel comfortable doing pretty much anything except watching TV, sleeping, or playing a video game. I was using every means at my disposal to profoundly lock the world out. And I got to a point eventually where I was just praying to die. I felt like I don't have the strength or the guts to actually kill myself. So I would pray that I would be forced to drive to get groceries one day, and maybe a drunk would hit me on the highway, or somebody would mug me and bonk me on the head and I would die, or any of a number of very, very, very unpleasant imaginary scenarios. But that's the point at which I found myself. And in between my prayers to just have somebody kill me off, please, I was also praying, knowing that that kind of ideation is indicative of a very significant mental health issue. I was also praying, Lord, something has to change. I don't know how to change it. I need something to change, and I am at a loss. I'm helpless to make anything happen. So please, God, if you want me to change, if you don't want me to die, I'm begging you to bring something across my path that I can latch onto. And looking back, I didn't realize it at the time what an answer to prayer was, but looking back now, I know I discovered a man from a TED Talk on a PBS station in my area, and his name was Dr. Peter Attia, and probably a lot of you are familiar with that name. But he was saying fascinating things. He was talking about health span as opposed to lifespan, and this is something I'd never heard any doctors or even health professionals or even nutritionists or anybody who was in the health sphere talking about health span as opposed to lifespan. And he was the first person who I ever heard say, would I rather live to 75 and be healthy and hearty that entire time and then just drop dead one day? Or would I rather live to 80 or 95 rather, but spend the last quarter century of my life in pain and being dependent on other people to take care of me? And I really, really resonated with that. So that got me curious. And since I didn't really have anything else to do, since I was sitting home alone, watching TV and being on the internet or sleeping all day, I decided, well, I'll just look up some more of Dr. Attia and see what he has to say. And I have to say, I've since kind of moved on from Dr. Attia. I appreciate his what he donated in terms of his work to my well-being, but I kind of moved on because I don't really agree with him as much as other people that I have subsequently found. But through him, I discovered Nina Teicholz. And through Nina Teicholz, I discovered Dr. Ken Berry. And through Dr. Ken Berry, I discovered a whole bunch of other people, but specifically my favorite mentors, Bart Kay and Pim Jansen. And I have since come to understand that that PBS program was my answer to prayer, because through the work of these wonderful mentors, I became emboldened to try a low-carb, high-fat way of eating. And I went, and I was 60 pounds heavier than I am now, was almost immobilized with, as I say, grief, PTSD, and clinical depression. And I just was powerless to do anything about it. But the first step I did was I stopped eating sugar and I stopped eating grains. And just that, after about 8 weeks, I suddenly woke up one morning and realized I didn't want to die that day. I actually wanted to get up and do things and see what life had in store for me that day. For the first time in I don't know how many years, at least for the first time since my mother passed in 2016. So at that point, my life just started getting better. And as my life got better and I became more active, I realized my PTSD symptoms, my ideation of the world was dangerous and there's nothing I could do about it, began to recede. And keep in mind, I hadn't taken any treatment for it because I had given up on that. It hadn't done me any good. And eventually I became emboldened to, at first I was just, excuse me, low carb, high fat. I wasn't really keto. But eventually I became emboldened to take the jump and to try keto, a ketogenic diet. And that made things even better. I started losing some weight, some fat, and I started feeling better inside my body. And my emotional symptoms got even better. And then through the work of my field marshal, Bart K., I became emboldened, and his lovely, lovely, lovely partner, Pim Jansen, who I will forever be grateful for her personal attention to me. I decided to try to go carnivore. And once I had gotten about 4 to 6 weeks into a committed carnivore way of eating, my world had completely changed. I felt strong. I felt like I could struggle against the world and make headway once more. I felt like if the world threw another tragedy at me, yeah, it would be unpleasant, but I could deal with it. I began to think positively about the future for the first time in many, many, many years. And of course, there's a lot of details missing here, but I don't want to make this video too long. I just want you to know that I'm convinced that a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet started healing my brain. I had fallen for so many years for the misinformation that plant-based was the way to go, and I had been gradually moving myself towards more and more and more plant-based because I was convinced that that was going to make me healthier and resolve all my symptoms. And of course it didn't. All my symptomology just got worse, and I allowed myself to be fooled into thinking I just wasn't doing it right, and I wasn't doing it hard enough, and I wasn't doing it persistently enough, and I just tried harder and harder, and I just got worse and worse and worse until I just gave up. And low carb, high fat, and carnivore meat and fat gave me my life back. I am absolutely convinced nothing that I did to try to improve my physical health and mental health ever worked anywhere near the way meat and fat has worked. All right, so please, as I've said before, do not slam over. There's a sensible way to do it, and I did it very slowly in stages. As I've said before, the first thing I did was ditch sugar and seed oils and flour and all grain, really. And that was by far the hardest. It took me about 6 months just to get comfortable with that way of eating. And if that's how long it takes you, do it. It's worth it. Don't get, disappointed and let yourself get bogged down because that's hard. That was the hardest stage for me, and I suspect it probably will be for you too. But get started today. If those 3 even are too big of a bite for you, start with ditching sugar. Get rid of sucrose. Get rid of it. Get rid of honey, sucrose. Don't worry about artificial sweeteners to start with. That's probably too big a bite. But if you can, get rid of sugar, grains, and seed oils. Just get rid of them. And as I've said before, it's going to be hard because that's going to be about 99% of all the junk food that's out there. And it's probably going to be about 99% of all the convenience foods that you're eating, if you're eating any volume of convenience foods at all. If you want some step-by-step help, if you want some assistance in thinking this through, please hit me in the comments. Also tell me your backstories. I would love to read them. If you have any questions, again, post them in the comments. I will get back to every one of you that I possibly can. All right. So that's it. I don't want to make long videos. I think it's easier in tiny bites. You can just eat little bites throughout the day, which is not what you're supposed to do with food, but it is what you're supposed to do with knowledge. Okay. And once again, here we go. You know what to do. You know what these are. Thanks a lot. I love you all. Bye.